This is an exam question based around the Treaty of Versailles. Simply at the top you can see what is the message behind this source, and of course it is a 6-point question. And the first thing you should always look to when looking at a source is when was it actually published. So you can see from that big red arrow, published in 1919. That's going to be very important when thinking about the higher marks in this question. So within this video we're going to look at the meaning behind it, we're going to look at some of the source details to support our answer, and we're going to be looking at contextual knowledge. So let's have a look at the mark scheme behind this question. Of course, for 1 to 2 marks you'll simply answer the question and you'll look at what the message or the meaning behind the source is. To move up to the next level you need to use the source details. Now I think it's always important that you look at the body posture or facial expressions or some of the key aspects actually within the source to back up your answer. And then for the higher marks, this idea of contextual knowledge, simply meaning what was going on at the time, you'll need to make some kind of reference to that within your answer. So let's have a look at some of the contextual knowledge for this period. So what was going on at the time of 1919 and 1920? So it's really important that the memories of World War I were clearly fresh in people's mind. This was an event like no other within human history. Apparently some of the estimates range from around 10, 11, 12 million people died in a horrendous war that affected many different people within the people of Europe. Now, thinking about Europe, most of the fighting actually took place within France, Belgium. So let me highlight the area around here. That's where most of the fighting took place, and lots of the fighting actually took place within France itself, around this area. Now, an area the size of Wales was actually destroyed in France during this time, and this will have implications for when thinking about our answer. So the peace treaty that was signed at the end of World War I was signed at the Palace of Versailles in France, hence the Treaty of Versailles. It's surrounded in controversy because many historians feel that it was actually too harsh, and that as a result of this peace treaty it helped to cause a war in the future in 1939, obviously known as World War II. And central to the context of this period are these people here known as the Big Three. Now here on the left we have George Clemenceau. He is the President of France. His nickname at the time was Tiger because he was so ferocious in wanting revenge from the German people. He wanted to make sure that Germany could never rise again and never cause a war in the future. He wanted revenge for the humiliation that some of the French suffered with regards to the Germans destroying factories and things like that, and of course revenge for an area the size of Wales that was destroyed. In the middle here we have of course David Lloyd George, the Prime Minister of Britain. He was in the middle ground in between wanting revenge and letting Germany off lightly. Yes, he did want punishment from Germany, but he didn't want a punishment that was that harsh that it would actually crush Germany into persuading them to want their own revenge in the future. So Lloyd George wanted that middle ground. Of course, on the right here we have Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson was known as an idealist. He was a man who wanted to rebuild Germany. He recognised the importance of Germany to Europe, and he did not want a peace treaty that would crush them. More specific details relating to what was going on at the time when this poster was published is that the treaty came under much criticism. Many critics argued that the Treaty of Versailles was far too harsh. They argued that the Germans were so humiliated because of what had happened under the Treaty of Versailles, because of their army had been reduced drastically, they had a massive fine due to the reparations, they had lost colonies and land, that they would ultimately want revenge because of the Treaty of Versailles. They argued that this would have the reverse effect of what a peace treaty should do, and that it would indeed actually lead to another war in the future. So now it's your turn. You should now look at the key details, the images and the words and phrases that are used within this historical cartoon to think about what the message is behind the source. Pay particular attention, as always, to the body posture and the facial expressions, not to forget the contextual knowledge of what was going on at the time. So press pause now. So let's have a closer look at the cartoon to see what you were able to pick out in order to figure out what the message is behind the source. Let's just set the scene. Here we have a historical cartoon from the period of 1919, when the Treaty of Versailles was just created. And here we have the leaders at the time. We have here the Big Three, accompanied with Orlando, who is the leader of Italy. They are leaving the Palace of Versailles. We can see that from the pillar there. That's an indication from like a grand building. And we've got a child crying there, and we have the Big Three and Italy moving away in direction. So let's have a look at some of the specifics. You'll notice right at the top here the phrase there, peace and future cannon fodder. Now, cannon fodder was a phrase that was used in World War I to describe the millions of deaths that occurred due to the new technology like machine guns and the heavy artillery and poisonous gas. Cannon fodder was the phrase used to sort of exemplify how easy it was for the men to die. It's almost like food for cannons. So what this cartoon is saying, that what has happened as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, more soldiers will die in the future. Now let's have a closer look at the child here that's crying in the corner. You will see here that it says above his head 1940 class, and also here when you look, the tiger, curious. I seem to hear a child weeping, and we can't of course ignore where it says 1940 class. Now we need to have a look at who the tiger is, and as previously mentioned, the tiger was actually George Clemenceau. So Clemenceau there, his body language is very interesting. He's looking towards the child, but when we look at his facial expressions and his body posture, it's clear that he's walking away and he does not care. Something similar could be said for Wilson and also Lloyd George. They have their hats held aloft as a sign of respect for the dead. Now, when we look a little bit closer, when we to highlight the peace treaty here, it's clear that the child has actually read the peace treaty. As a result of this, the child is actually crying, and at the top of his head where it says 1940 class, this is where the child at that time is crying, because in 1940, when it's grown up to be an adult, it will actually be a soldier. Now, some people disagree with who the child represents. It could be a German soldier. It's crying because in the future it knows there will be another war, and this child will have to take part in the fighting, probably due to conscription, and as a result of that will probably die due to the fighting. Or the child could also represent the children from the Allied nations like England, America and France. But overall, the message of this is that the Treaty of Versailles is that harsh that it will actually create another war in the future, because Germany will want to get its revenge and rise again as a powerful nation. So again, when answering this question, make sure you consider the mark scheme. If you simply just answer the question, you're going to get 1 to 2 marks. A tip would be to directly answer the question in your opening sentence. Bring the question into your answer. For 3 to 4 marks, of course, you're going to use some of the source details that we've been talking about. So, for example, you're going to talk about the child that's weeping in the corner. This idea of the class of 1940. Again, this point about how it could be a sarcastic tone. The body language that's used. The hats that are being held aloft as a respect to the dead, etc. You only need to really use 2 or 3 points. You don't need to get everything that's in there, so don't worry. And finally, make sure you get some contextual knowledge in about what was going on at the time. And what's going on at the time is that the Treaty of Versailles came under much criticism. Many people said that it was too harsh. Some criticised the treaty because they said it would actually cause another war in the future. So make sure that you bear these key points in mind, and good luck with it.